Hey, IDS 301. Welcome to Module 4, Video 1. It is Sunday, January 31st, approximately 11:55 a.m. Want to watch soccer? Okay. Uh, how's it going? I really thought this was going to be a short video, but buckle up your seatbelts because it's going to be a hell of a ride. Uh, Lots to talk about. This, in terms of what you just did, is huge, in my opinion. It's huge. Okay, so let me get some housekeeping out of the way for 301. Let's go to the 301 window. Um, as this is just general things. As you get into these longer assignments, more intense assignments, I don't think there's one this module 4, but like the plan of study, and you'll have cognitive mapping to do. Try not to start them on the due date, okay? I know you won't hand it in, a lot of you, until last minute, last hour, but be sure that you're um, giving this work the academic rigor that it deserves, that you deserve. Okay, you're in this program, you're paying the money, so get something out of it in terms of academic rigor, where you are thinking about the work that's going to come due the following Sunday. Maybe by Tuesday, you can start outlining some of the conceptual ideas that you have about the paper or the organization. And as you move through the week, you're working more and more towards putting a nice piece together. Okay, so let's talk about just little things. I mean, if you're not talking about interdisciplinary studies, the field, then you shouldn't capitalize interdisciplinary. Interdisciplinary is not capitalized at all unless it starts a sentence or is followed by studies, in which case both words need to be capitalized. I think I talked about this already. American studies, both capital, Asian studies, both capital. Well, Asian and American are capitalized on their own. Interdisciplinary studies, both words capitalized, not when used by itself. It's fine. Discussion boards, don't post them in Word. I don't think there's any discussion board in this course that requires Word. I'll keep my eyes on that, but I don't think so. And unless it does, I'll always remind you. I won't ding you, but try to just post it as a discussion. Okay, so do you see what I see? Well, by Petri. What I see is, I think, a lot of advancement in your interdisciplinary competency. That's what I see in this from that discussion board. I saw you use the concepts, use the terminology that are so important in this field that, frankly, I was actually blown away. Not just quality work was good, but the fact that here you've made the connection. So I think, because we all would agree that when you type things down, when you write them down, they're more assimilated into you than if you were just reading them. You're reading them, you have to think about it, you have to consider it, put it down, you start to get it. So, you probably see where integration comes in. I know integration is only mentioned once or twice in that piece, but remember, it was written in 1976. They were still formulating, interdisciplinary as a field itself and as a concept, and so integration wasn't, didn't get going until later. Okay, so sorry, let me turn that down. Uh, so some of the terms like epistemology, um, you learned about idea dominance, interdisciplinary projects, psychological characteristics, cognitive maps. It was a variety of concepts and terminology that you were able to be introduced to and utilize in explaining when you responded to those 7 prompts that I gave you. I like looking at this, and I got to admit, I didn't reread it completely this session like I always do, and I'm going to do that today. I'm going to sit outside and read it. But I did go through much of it and took notes on Petrie. Um, so on page 30, I'll quote him here. First, however, a few preliminary distinctions need to be noted. I distinguish between interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary efforts. So you can see how we've, coalesced that concept into the hard thinking about interdisciplinary is different than multidisciplinary. And, you know, like he says, the line is not hard and fast, but roughly it is that multidisciplinary projects simply require everyone to do their own thing together with little or no necessity for only one participant to be aware of any other participant's work. In other words, it lacks integration, right? Interdisciplinary efforts, on the other hand, require more or less integration and even modification of the disciplinary sub-contributions while the inquiry is proceeding. You notice that while it's proceeding, different participants need to take into account the contributions of their fellows in order to make their own contributions. So essentially, he's making the case for the interdisciplinary aspect of this and defining it. However, if you'll notice, of course, that he's talking much more about individuals who represent disciplinary expertise coming together and integrating through a process, not just going straight up without connecting with each other. This differs, of course, for what we are doing in terms of interdisciplinary studies when we choose two concentrations and we're looking at those to integrate. Remember the similarities to that, to integration. Yes, look at yourself as an interdisciplinarian, as someone who could be introduced to these ideas and then go into a committee where integration was required and understand these concepts, okay? Because you may have a political science major, somebody in politics, you may have a religious studies major, you may have a sociologist, you may have a economist and things, and they are not interdisciplinarians on their own. They're academic in their own academic field, which is singular. But the integration of what they come up with and what they're looking at and analyzing is interdisciplinary and has that integrative factor. You on your own are also looking at being an interdisciplinary means that if you have to analyze, if you're going to analyze research, look at some phenomena, topic, problem, issue, you are capable of crossing disciplinary boundaries, understanding what to look for, what you're going to run into, and then working in an integrative process to better inform your response to that. Okay, so let's go at Easter egg number one. And I'm going to clumsily say this, but just interdisciplinarity comes through individuals or by committee. Okay, I don't want to get too wordy here, but more or less interdisciplinarity comes through is through individual interdisciplinarians. You don't have to put that big all those big words, or by committee of disciplinarians. You get what I'm saying there, and I want you to put it down. Okay, so on page 31, he talks about some non-epistemological factors. I just wanted to try to say that word. I think you guys on the response did a really good job on that. On page 32, 33, he did talk about idea dominance, necessity for some kind of achievement. So that was in response, I think, to, when we talk about not a bull session. You don't want this interdisciplinary committee is not going to turn into a bull session. I mean, we're just going to all talk and everything. No, there is, in fact, a necessity for some kind of achievement. We are having an objective, okay? The psychological characteristics of the participants. Again, when you think about any committee, any group of people you're in, a club, a group of friends, there's going to be different personalities, different psychological characteristics. Some can be aggressive in their communication. Some can be more passive. Some can be passive aggressive. There's all kinds of different ways. And that is a factor. And it's a non epistemological factor. Okay. Then you're talking about the participants themselves, a sense of adventure. It's not like they're about rock climbing or like that, but to go beyond, that's transcend. But to look, sense of adventure, disciplinary competence, and security. Okay, those the disciplinary competence and security, along with that sense of adventure, those are kind of conflicting terms there. Not many sense of adventure is when you have security. And disciplinary self-discipline and competence. But this is a requirement that you're building your disciplinary competence, and then you can take that with your sense of adventure and open-minded critical thinking, right? Um, the precise mix of disciplinary competence, adventurous spirit, and broad interest may be difficult to determine. Um, I think that's what he said. I cut it off there, but it's a difficult combination, but one that's unique. And I think each of you who know what I'm talking about have that. Okay, you understand it, and you understand it differently than jack of all trades, right? You understand it as different characteristics that help you to look at things a different way. Whereas some folks might be able to go straight down, up and down into deep, mathematics or something, where that's their thing, and that's great. Okay, so epistemological considerations. Now, actually, in page 35 is what I want to focus on here a lot. It was the cognitive mapping. Some of you got this question 6 and 7 wrong. One was about cognitive mapping. One was about some of the four components. Also, but before that was tacit learning. I think you got that. I mean, but anyways, okay, this is quote, page 35, by cognitive map here, I mean, this is Petrie, the whole cognitive and perceptual apparatus utilized by any given discipline. So you hear that? It's by any given discipline. Some of you gave me answers that had to do with the individual and their own internal mapping and mental mapping and sense of direction and all kinds of things. And I hate to say it, but I don't think you read it. I think you went to Google and you Googled cognitive map, because I've done that and I see what's there. And I can see that you've used that here. And that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about cognitive mapping in terms of individual discipline or concentration, field of study, okay? So, and then he says, this includes, now the apparatus here that's utilized, this includes, but is not limited to, basic concepts, modes of inquiry, what counts as a problem, observational categories, representation techniques, standards of proof, types of explanation, and general ideas of what constitutes the discipline. So here again, where some of you might have did a control find on that paper and went to 4 and typed in 4 because you're looking for 4 things to put into 4 things, and you came up with Hoax or what's his name, Harry Brody's 4 elements of learning instead. But this is about cognitive mapping. So what this is in this case, okay, let me finish. Quite literally, 2 opposing disciplinarians can look at the same thing and not see the same thing. I hope to illustrate this thesis in a few moments. Okay, now, so what I'm talking about here in cognitive mapping, this is a mapping of a discipline, the map of a discipline. It can be called, it might be a clumsy term, it could be better called the criteria of a discipline, the unique criteria of a discipline, or just like, but it is pieces, just like a map. You can choose a number of different ways to go. Cognitive mapping in a discipline is similar. There are many different concepts, terms, theories, methods, designs, all across the board of academia. Some have this one and this one, some have this one and this one, some have this. So they pick their routes to get to where they need to go. So cognitive mapping of a discipline, let's say you have economics as a discipline. Well, that discipline is going to have its own rule book, playbook, call it what you want, but it's going to have their own set of basic concepts, modes of inquiry. That's the different types of research. Some rely heavily on qualitative, some on quantitative, some on both, right? Basic concepts, modes of inquiry, what counts as a problem? What counts as a problem in one discipline may not register on the Richter scale of another one. Okay, observational categories, the way they see particular sections, segments of their discipline, which can be very different depending on what that is. Representation techniques, standards of proof, which would be going into like a peer review type of thing. What are the standards of proof? Types of explanation, and general ideals of what constitutes the discipline. Okay, it's important. Now, he uses a list of criteria that we're not gonna go with. What you see in a couple modules from now is a very clear listing of a way to cognitively map your concentrations. And we're going to go with that later. So I want you to keep remembering that. On page 36, talked about failing to realize the significant differences in cognitive maps, and yet faced with the necessity for communicating with each other on some level or another, the participants retreat to the level of common sense, which is shared by all. So it's kind of in a way that, you know, I'll take my group of friends that I've had, for one of them for 57 years and most of them for over 45, 50 years. Same group of guys. We're like brothers, okay? There's about 5 to 6 of us. We have developed, as each of us through our lives, differences of opinions, different ideals, different values, different ideologies. So in the case where he's talking about faced with the necessity of communicating with each other on some level or another, the participants retreat to the level of common sense, which is shared by all. So we typically, we're all different, so we talk to each other differently, and each of us have a different appropriate conversations. Okay, I can't talk to a certain segment of my buddies about a certain thing because I just don't want to get into it, right? But I'm just saying we take it back down to common sense, take it back down to the basics. The common threads that we all have, the common shared, value and support we've always had as friends. So we can always start there, go back there. And I'm trying to make this a metaphor, which of course he gets into, for the participants of an interdisciplinary committee and how they would, well, they don't get along on this level of anything. So let's take it back down. Let's go back to where we agree, and then we'll go start over again. Okay. So he talks about Harry Brody, gives us a clue here. He has distinguished 4 uses of learning. This is where some of you use that as the mapping concepts, but it's not. It's 4 uses of learning: the associative, the replicative, the applicative, and the interpretive. Roughly, these uses of learning are as follows. One uses learning associatively. One, on the occasion of use, the learning provides a context of association. This goes into detail. I'm not going to keep going on this. On page 38, he starts talking about, tacit learning. And he talks about, here's where he gets into see what I see. Can you see what I see? Do you see the young woman? Do you see the young woman bikini or the martini? Do you see the old woman with the big nose, or do you see the young woman with her head turned away with the choker chain? Okay, this is a metaphor, a visual metaphor. All right. So let's see. My suggestion here is quite simple. It often happens that when different disciplines look at the same thing, same lines in the paper even, they observe different things. Thus, it is necessary for people engaged in interdisciplinary work to understand each other's observational categories. So, again, we're taking these into, some real life situations and how you'd run into things. On page 39, things take a little bit of a left turn that I'm not too comfortable with when he talks about the black scores 10 to 15 points below whites on standard IQ tests. Now, I realize this, just so you know, he is using this, I believe, intentionally as a provocative fact/values statement to make. This is just done in 1976. I was a senior in high school, and there was the bell curve, I think it was, the very controversial study, and a lot of things were shifting at that point in terms of standardized testing, in terms of other things. So this is a provocative statement, yet one that's accepted by fact for a lot of people. And then he talks about true facts, false facts, controversial facts. And he's doing this to evaluate the types of level of resistance. And so it's a very in your face kind of example, metaphor. I'm not thrilled with using it. I just think it could be distracting. I think it's better if I probably wouldn't even included that. But again, this is from 1976. I'm talking about metaphors on page 41. That traditionally have enabled us to gain an insight into a new area by juxtaposing language and concepts. Blah blah blah. Here, he uses ambiguous figures as visual metaphors. Okay. Um, just to think about what's on a line. Um, I could have these letters in a sentence: Nowhere, Nowhere. And what do you hear from it? What would you read? Would you read nowhere, or would you read now here? Very two different things. Add that little space, and we go from nowhere to now here, right? So do you see what I see? Do you read what I read? So in summarizing, he says, I've argued that for truly interdisciplinary as opposed to multidisciplinary efforts, the factors of idea dominance, psychological characteristics of participants, institutional setting are all extremely important. So, institutional setting, it is important from that standpoint of academics, okay? Getting peer review, getting peer recognition, having funding, having administrative support. So these aren't just bull sessions. They do take, and I think we've seen that moving forward since 76, which is, God only knows, 44 or 45 years ago. Yikes. Okay. So let's see, I'll skip through this. All right. So Easter egg number 2 is simply, do you see what I see? Do you see what I see? I think it was an important writing. I know I'm way over my normal time, but it's very important stuff here that you got to witness here. All right. So let's see. Let's get right into, well, chapter 5 is about integrative learning. I think you're going to see a lot of integrative learning in an applied in your daily life, in your academic life. That's a good chapter. Read that one. And remember the quiz is due tonight. Okay, now with chapter 5 was from module 3. Now module 4, you're going to read chapter 6, 7, and 8. All right, and I'm going to go through those more in video 2. Explore the reading and or other material. Okay, there's supplemental readings that take a look at those, because there's some good stuff in there. Nothing's long, nothing's dragged out. It's not, Dr. Padilla would call it supplemental, means it's not required, but let's face it, how many of you are going to read it if it's not required? If I don't say it's required, even though nothing is required, as I've said a million times. Take a look at that stuff. It's good stuff, and it applies to you, your career, your field, and this course, all right? Then there's the 2 discussions. They're awesome, right? The gorgeous networks discussion, I think you'll enjoy that one a lot. Make sure you watch the video. Make sure you answer the prompts clearly. Break it up into paragraphs or line spaces in that, so I can read that. No Word docs. Do that. Do the responses. I think you'll like gorgeous networks. It's a way to visualize some of the things that academics are about. In discussion 4.2, it's the North Dakota's Norway experiment. I discovered that article, thank you, a little while ago, and it's so applicable to real life application of integrative studies, interdisciplinary work, that I think you'll enjoy it. I think it shows what's possible and what's needed, and what is a 21st century problem. What are we looking at here? Okay. Then you got quiz 3 on next Sunday. Maps is coming up, so get ready for that. But in the meantime, you do the reading 6, 7, 8. Take a look at the other materials. Discussion 4.1, discussion 4.2, and the quiz. That's all you got this week. So you should be able to assimilate some of this reading, some of this work. Enjoy it. I'm going to go sit outside and read a lot about Tanner and stuff again. Easter egg number 3 is Cognitive mapping of disciplines. I just want you to remember what that is. Cognitive mapping of disciplines, okay? So I'm going on 25 minutes. I know it was a long one. I hope you got a lot out of this module, last module 3 and Petri, because it's good stuff like we wrote there. It's a classic, all right? So forks up. Peace. Have a good day.